All right. I think all systems go. So welcome again. This is becoming a vendor or concessionaire with local institutions. My name is Marley Wilson. I'm with the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. All right. I think all systems go. So, okay. Sorry about that. I was hearing the playback there. I'm with the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. I'm the Good Food Purchasing Project Manager, and I am joined by Ruby Ferguson, who's the Food Equity Lead with the Chicago Mayor's Office and the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Thanks, Ruby, for joining me for this session this morning. Next slide. So before we get started with the session, I'm going to turn it over to our interpreter, our Spanish interpreter, Letty, to share the instructions for accessing Spanish interpretation. Next slide. And Letty, are you able to?
Muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Leti Beitia y estoy aquí con mi compañera Leti Pérez, quienes vamos a estar sirviendo como intérpretes esta mañana. Tenemos interpretación para cada sesión, así es que al ingresar a una sesión verá una notificación de que los servicios de interpretación están disponibles. Por favor de hacer clic en el icono del globo terráqueo y elegir la interpretación en los idiomas disponibles, o si lo prefieren simplemente desactivar la función. Muchas gracias y que disfruten su conferencia esta mañana.
Thank you, Letty. We also have closed captions in English. So we have an ASL interpreter as well. Thank you, Carmen. And so if you would like to access the closed captioning in English, you will see a notification that closed captioning services are available at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on the CC icon to show subtitles or view a full transcript or modify subtitle settings. Next slide. Okay, so we have a packed agenda for this 45-minute session. So we are going to review the landscape of what institutions are involved in the Good Food Purchasing Initiative currently in Metro Chicago. I'll turn it over to Ruby to talk about the Chicago Food Equity Council's procurement working group. And then I'll share some resources on how farmers, food producers, caterers, and restaurants can access support in becoming a vendor with the City of Chicago or Cook County, and some of the different ways in which that might look. And then we're going to try to save as much time as possible in the session to talk about a new resource that is in development with the procurement working group that maps out the contractual landscape. And we're hoping that we can get a lot of feedback from everyone joining us on what that should look like. And then I do have a poll at the end that I will launch so that you all can share your feedback on this session. Okay, so quick review of the Good Food Purchasing Policy. If you joined us for the morning session, the welcome remarks with Erica Allen, we did go over a little bit about what the Good Food Purchasing Policy is, but for everyone here, I don't want to assume everyone was on the morning welcome, and then for folks who are tuning into the YouTube recording, I'll just do a quick brief overview on what the Good Food Purchasing Policy is and how it's shifting, it's beginning to shift food spend by our local institutions towards values that we care about. So next slide. So as I mentioned this morning in the earlier session, the good food purchasing policy is shifting the way that public institutions purchase food, really towards equity, transparency, and accountability, and directing food spend towards local economies, a valued workforce, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and nutrition and health. And we work with our partners at the Center for Good Food Purchasing, who support the policy implementation all across the country. I went over the values this morning as well, but it really is about how are we holistically looking at what institutions are purchasing and identifying ways for them to provide not just purchase healthier food, but also prepare and serve healthier foods, more culturally relevant foods. How do they reduce their overall carbon and water footprint while also investing in more sustainable farming operations with their food purchases? How are they really lifting up worker-owned cooperatives and unionized companies in their supply chain, while also holding companies in their supply chain accountable for workplace violations? How are they investing in a more equitable and sustainable local food economy and reducing the overall amount of red meat that they're serving and animal protein that they're serving? But when they do serve those animal proteins, really supporting humane sources for that meat. Next slide. So as I mentioned this morning as well, thanks y'all for those who have listened to this twice. This is a national movement, and we're really fortunate that here in Chicago, we have the local policy adoption, but that we are working with other communities all across the country on shifting the landscape of institutional food towards these values in, at this higher level. Next slide. And as I mentioned this morning as well, we have adopted the good food purchasing policy as a city. The city of Chicago, the Chicago Park District, and Chicago Public Schools all formally adopted the policy in 2017, and Cook County's Board of Commissioners adopted the policy in 2018. So that gives, next slide, that signaled a commitment of both the city and county to begin shifting all of the food spend of these different environments towards good food. So that includes school meals, summer and after school meals, senior meals, emergency meals, the city colleges, concessions at the airports, food festivals that are run through the Department of Cultural Affairs and special events, the Downtown Riverwalk concessionaires, as well as the jails and juvenile temporary detention center with the county and the public health system, and county facilities that provide vending and concessions. So overall, this is about $118 million that are spent on food by these institutions, these public institutions every year. Although that number could be up to 300 million because we're still evaluating the concessions environment as well. Next slide. In addition to our public institutions that have adopted the good food purchasing policy and are starting to shift their food spend towards the good food values, we started a good food and healthcare cohort last year with our partners at the Illinois Public Health Institute's Alliance for Health Equity and the doula part, our consultants at the doula part. And this includes 6 hospitals that are exploring good food purchasing strategies as well. Next slide. So what is the impact of this policy on local food providers? Well, so just to review, the policy commits all of the different institutions that purchase food or maintain food environments to set goals towards shifting their food spend towards those values. Um, those institutions are also changing solicitations and requests for proposals for food supplies and services. So it's really being codified into their food related contracts. And this means potential growing opportunities for local values aligned farms, food producers, distributors, caterers, restaurants, and food service providers to create, more sales and, market opportunities by leveraging institutions, food spend and food environments. And this is an opportunity for our kind of local food providers to reach community in potentially new ways, serving local schools, serving the local senior centers, serving the downtown Riverwalk. There's so many different avenues that the city and county are involved with when it comes to meal programs and food environments. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruby to talk a little bit about how, as we see this kind of growing opportunity with the good food purchasing policy, how the city is working to ensure that that we're working towards that goal equitably.
Yeah, thank you, Marley, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to level set and talk a little bit about Chicago's Food Equity Council, and really won't get into the full context of the council, but we'll just provide a little background information. So the purpose of Chicago's Food Equity Council is really focused on making a more just and equitable and resilient food system in Chicago that eliminates disparities in health and wealth. And so the role of this body is to convene city departments and sister agencies, community and residents leaders to shape policy and programmatic opportunities through the food equity agenda, and also be an implementer of these recommendations and an enabler of public accountability. And so in June 2021, the food equity agenda was published and it highlighted 3 goals, which was formally establishing the Food Equity Council, which we had an executive order that was signed in February 2022 to help codify the council, advance this policy and programmatic agenda that was outlined in this food equity agenda, and expand the coalition of folks supporting Chicago's food system. And so after the executive order was signed, we activated 4 working groups across 5 priorities. And today we're diving into one of those priorities, which is leveraging procurement to support local BIPOC growers and producers. And so just kind of giving a high level overview of some of the objectives we're thinking about in this working group is how can we support further implementation of GFPP with a city department, a sister agency, and a hospital? What are nutrition standards for city-served foods that thinks of food more holistically and has a more expansive definition of good food? So in value alignment with the good food purchasing program, and also acknowledging cultural relevance, and that food is more than just calories in versus calories out, but food is community, it's connection, it's mourning, it's celebration, and how do we give context for food being all of those things? And then the other kind of objective I really want to highlight here is the mapping of city food contracts, and we'll have a deeper discussion on that today. But how can we make city food contracts more transparent and accessible to local vendors, potential applicants, growers, caterers, et cetera, where you can understand the landscape, know what it means to engage in this space, and know how to get ready if you do. And I'll turn it back over to Marley.
Thanks, Ruby. So I'm just quickly going to talk through a high level overview of how to become a vendor with public institutions in Chicago and Cook County, with the caveat that I am by no means a procurement expert, but I have been researching the procurement landscape and working with departments and agencies on the good food purchasing policy. And hopefully I can help kind of give that high level overview and direct you to people who know a lot more about the process if needed. So just as a kind of high level setting here, there isn't a one size fits all way that different meal programs or food environments solicit services for food, food supply or food service management or concessions. It looks a little bit different depending on the opportunity. Sometimes they are looking for a small order, something under $150,000 to $250,000. They have different thresholds at the city and county. So if it's a small order for them, it's a slightly less formal process for purchasing food or food services. As soon as the contract or the expected amount of the contract is large enough, a much more formal competitive bidding process is required, where there must be a formal advertisement made about the opportunity. It needs to be posted online, and then anyone that responds that bids on that contract will be kind of publicly noted online as bidding on that contract. And all of this is in an effort for the city and county to be more transparent about who they're doing business with, how they're evaluating bids, and ensuring that they're making sure it's there's as little opportunity for corruption as possible. And then they use criteria to issue the award of the contract to the most responsive and responsible bidder who responds to, who bids on that contract. Sometimes they use the city or county's departments and agencies will use a little bit more of a complex evaluation through a request for proposals, an RFP process, where it's typically used for more like professional services where they're really considering the quality of the service, not just the lowest price. And so we do see RFPs used more when a particular agency or department is going out to bid for food service management, for example. So next slide. And I know that's a lot of jargon around the procurement process. So if there's any language that I just shared that was confusing, please throw them a note in the chat and I can help try to define the terms that I'm using a little bit more specifically. So when the city and county goes out to bid for food services, they have incentive programs. So if somebody is bidding on a contract and is a certified firm, they get a leg up in the process. They're awarded more points and have a higher potential to be awarded the contract. And that's the case for both certified firms that are directly bidding on the contract and certified firms that are subcontracting with enterprises that identify as and are certified as a minority owned, women owned, person with disability owned, socially disadvantaged business enterprise, or a veteran owned enterprise. And if you are interested in what these certifications look like, how does a business get certified as one of these entities, there's a whole session on it at 1:30 with experts from the Chicago Department of Procurement Services and the Women's Business Development Center that I think will be really valuable. I do have a link to kind of a one-pager on the certification process that I'll drop in the chat as well. All right, next slide. So if you are even just interested in kind of seeing what opportunities the city and county are putting out for around food supply and food services and concessions, food concessions, I highly recommend just registering in their online procurement systems, which is free and relatively easy to register. So the city of Chicago has an Supplier e-procurement system, and I'll drop that link in the chat as well. And Cook County, to view solicitations, you need to register directly with them at one link, and then they use something called Bonfire, which is software where you can actually download a solicitation and respond to it. So those are kind of the general city and counties online platforms where you can look at like, what are they going out to bid for? What kinds of food services are they, or food supply are they looking for? Next slide. There are a lot of helpful resources to support vendors. One being a buying plan. They have something called a consolidated buying plan, which is a forecast for all goods and services that they'll be looking for over like the next 12 to 15 months. And I will drop the links for the buying plans in the chat as well, but I will just note that because food-related contracts falls into a lot of different categories, like sometimes it's considered a commodity, sometimes it's considered a service, it can be challenging to search for all food-related contracts, contracting opportunities. It also doesn't necessarily include all the solicitations that will come up, because there are unexpected or emergency solicitations that are not necessarily referenced in the buying plan forecast. So it's a helpful tool. I think it gives a good like general understanding of what opportunities for vending with the city look like. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's the end all be all, but it's a great starting point. Next slide. There are also, and I'm sorry, I haven't thrown the links in the chat just yet. I will, I promise, once I'm done with the wrap here in a second. So there are a ton of also really awesome resources that the city, the county, and partners have put out to support new food vendors. So while they're not specific to food vendors themselves, they're kind of like general supports for any kind of company or business that wants to, work with the city or county. The procurement services department with the city has just published a set of really helpful resource guides that I will post in the chat. They also do presentations on a regular basis about procurement and about the certification process, and their PowerPoints are available online. Cook County has a resource page called Doing Business with Cook County that's helpful. And then there are also our assist agencies and something called Procurement Technical Assistance Centers that you can access that are all about supporting small businesses with government contracting opportunities. And then last year, the Metro Chicago Good Food Purchasing Initiative put out a guide called Selling to Your Community's Institutions, a guide for growers and food businesses that's available online, and we'll have hard copies in Spanish and English available on Monday at our in-person Mixer event. But I will throw all of those links in the chat once I turn it back over to Ruby to talk about a new resource we're looking at developing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marley. So like I mentioned when I was talking about some of the objectives that the Institutional Procurement Work Group of the Food Equity Council is working on, one of the things that we really acknowledge is that this can be a confusing landscape to engage in and understand what's available for you. So CivPAC has already put together an incredible map of what are the available contracts throughout the city of Chicago and Cook County. But as a work group, we acknowledge that it would make sense to take this a step further. So how can we make this map detailed so that food producers and providers who are interested in selling to or working with institutions understand how to navigate this landscape? So it will be interactive and user-friendly, and then also share companies and opportunities that supply or operate public food environments. So I want to pause there because we're about to get to the interactive portion of this. And the next slide is going to kind of walk through the data that we're looking at. What I want to acknowledge is that we understand that there's going to be lots of terminology and acronyms related to this. And so as a work group, we landed on making sure that there was a kind of information guide to go with the map. So that way, when you see the map, we can distill down to the most pertinent information. And then the information guide can dive deep into how do I get certified? What does that mean, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a busy slide, but I'm going to start with a high-level overview of the topics we would like to cover. And this is really a space that we would love to get feedback from all of you if this feels right, or if you feel like something's missing, or if you have just feedback overall. So we broke all of the data that we wanted to collect about each agency into 5 different categories. So the first thing is general information about the agency. And when we say agency, we mean who's putting out the contract. So for example, CPS or DFSS might be an agency. And so are they active in implementing the Good Food Purchasing Program? What type of institution are they? Where can I find their website? What is the list of all the contracts that they have, right? Because each contract has different requirements. What are the results of their most recent GFPP assessment? And what are their goals and priorities? Where are they investing and supporting? So that way, as a grower or someone in the food space, you have an idea if they're really interested in sourcing hyper-local food, that might be an opportunity for you. The next category is looking at general information about the contract, and there's a lot listed here, but really it's asking, what is everything that you need to know about the contract? Where is the funding source? Does it have nutrition requirements that you would have to adhere to if it's prepared meals? If they are prepared meals, how many meals are they preparing? What are the range of the dates? What are the opportunities if you're applying? The third category is looking about information about the vendor or subcontractor. So in the CPS example that I gave, one of their current vendors is Airmark. And so it's possible that you could be a subcontractor with Airmark, or Airmark could procure from you. And so this section gives you a deeper dive on what's going on with that vendor. So is that vendor friendly to local businesses or small businesses? Who are they subcontracted with? Do they have traditional subcontractors that you need to be aware of, etc.? The fourth category is applying to the contract or subcontract. So really, what is required to apply? What does that process look like? When is the RFP release? Navigating all those questions. And then the final category, information overload, is what happens when you actually get that contract? So are there reporting requirements? How long does it take you to actually get paid? So that way, if you do decide to pursue one of these contracts, you have the right information and are prepared to deal with what you're getting into. So I'm going to pause there and keep this slide up. I know that Marley was dropping a lot of links, but I wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts or reflections on this map, and if the information seems right, if it's too much, or if you have some feedback on what we could add.
And I'll just share, you're welcome to share in the chat or unmute yourself and share verbally. And I know I also went through a lot of information and dropped a lot of resources in the chat. So if you have any questions about any of the material that I've shared or went through, we're happy to talk. Lean
I
in.
asked a lot of questions. Maybe it's helpful to ask one and start there. As a group, does this feel like too much information?
And Ruby, I'm wondering if we want to show an example of what the map looks like.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody can laugh at my technological difficulties. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, great. And we got one response, not too much. Does it feel like it would answer your questions?
And here I'll pull up this is,
I got you.
oh, you got it? You got it? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
You guys see this?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great. So maybe it's helpful to see what this interactive map could look like. And so here's an example of what the incredible map that's already put together looks like. And I'm going to dive into the city of Chicago and give the CPS example that I gave earlier. So you'll see here that we have the category of city departments and sister agencies. And then if you break out here, you can go into Chicago Public Schools, and it pulls up some information here about the public schools and kind of what their annual contract amount is. But what you'll note is it lists like, here are the types of programs you could apply for, but maybe doesn't break it out by contract, right? And so you might be interested in supporting after school meals, but maybe not breakfast as a very bad example. And then when you come here, you'll see that it'll filter into Airmark, and that's the vendor, right? So this was where we would provide more information about the subcontractor. And if you wanted to be a subcontractor with them, how could you navigate that? We're also hoping, or planning, not hoping, planning to put here that in addition to saying GFPP active, that you could see the results of their last GFPP assessment, so you could see where their spend is going. And great question, Danielle. So I'm going to elevate the question, and I would love your feedback, Danielle, if you feel like our approach as a work group makes sense. So Danielle asks, I'm wondering about minimum contract sizes, and I'm a small scale grower. And then Kate, you put in similar chat, we deal with a lot of farmers with small farms. What would be the best way for them to get involved with something like this? So part of our plan is an acknowledgement that this doesn't tell you everything, but if we were to highlight here, so if you go down to Morrisman Management Company and you see all the folks that they traditionally subcontract with, that you could click one of those subcontractors and understand that food distributor. The tool that we have in conjunction with the map, Danielle, would get to more of your question. As a smaller grower, how do you navigate in this space? And might direct you, so maybe these colored circles are a different color to flag that they're super local business friendly and are a great place to start. So starting to put asterisks on, here are opportunities for you to plug into.
Right,
then,
just to illustrate that, like maybe Pepsi isn't the greatest subcontractor to start with, but Midwest Foods might be a great one. And hopefully like as we update and work on the construction of this map, it would be really easy to see that. The map would really like direct you towards like, oh, this would be, Alex Franz would be a good person for me to get in touch with if I want to sell to Cook County Health, who Morrison Management operates the meal programs for.
Great. And then Taylor asked if I can demonstrate what happens when I filter by product offering. So I'm going to play with this, and I might not be the right person to do that. Again, I warned you that this is not my skill set. And this is the first iteration. So like if I hit prepared meals, here are all the prepared meals in the space so that you could understand if I'm a caterer or I'm interested in engaging in the prepared meal space, here's the opportunity for me to plug into. We're hoping to continue to make more filters like that so it's easy for you as a potential vendor or a future subcontractor to understand what are the opportunities in this landscape. Any other questions about the map? Would it be helpful now that you've seen what the map looks like to see what potential the topics that we're planning on adding to this map and getting some more feedback there? Cool.
Yeah, so like as Ruby's pulling that up, I'll just share that really the goal for this map is that it just, it makes real all of the things that I was just sharing about how to become a vendor, because you'd be like, you would be able to see like, oh, like here's an opportunity. I'm a caterer or a small upstart restaurant. I could participate in Taste of Chicago, and here's how I could do that. Or I could become a concessionaire at the Riverwalk in their community, rotating community restaurant site. Or, oh, like at my scale, I think I could work with this partner on providing culturally appropriate meals to different senior centers that are focused on specific populations across the city. So that is our hope. But of course, we're showing you this like work in progress, and not all the information is in there that we would like. And so that's where, we want to make sure as we're building out the information, it's the right information. So anyways, back to you, Ruby.
Danielle, your first question of when would this map go live? So Marley, if you could drop in the chat, the version I just showed you is already live and accessible. It is our goal that I'm going to give a lot of buffer. So this is hopefully too much buffer, that by the end of this year, we'll have an updated map with a lot of this information, with an understanding that adding all this data is going to make it a lot more complicated. So it might be version 2 of a few more. And hopefully we'll be seeking more feedback from all of you to say this was helpful or that was way too confusing. Can you set it up this way? The goal is really to make this information accessible to vendors and subcontractors. And so offering us feedback is the most powerful way for us to do that. Marley, in terms of links from the session, are we able to send them out after this session? Yep, so we'll be able to send them out.
Yeah, and I will upload them all to our online platform. So this online platform will be accessible for you for, I think we have it open for a year. So you can like go back to the platform anytime and access these links. And then, yeah, I'll just make sure it's kind of like uploaded into the system and available for everyone.
Any other questions or thoughts about the map? If you do have something that comes in your head later and you're like, oh, it'd be great to add that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I know that you just got inundated with a lot of information. And then we're like, and now give us feedback. But any feedback at any point is really valued.
Yeah, actually, Ruby, could you bring up our contact information? So yeah, again, we are really excited to be working with all the departments and agencies on updating and expanding the information over the next few months. And so we'll be kind of actively involved in that effort over the rest of the summer and the fall, and working with hopefully an Emerson Hunger Fellow on the research. And yeah, just appreciate everyone's feedback on this. And I just want to acknowledge that it feels really daunting right now to think about all of the different processes that are in place to work with a public institution. And a lot of those processes were developed to ensure, to hopefully ensure that everything was transparent and that they weren't, kind of doing corrupt business. And so we're trying to figure out with the city and the county, like how can we maintain that transparency and that accountability, but make these processes as simple as possible for small businesses, so that it's not that it doesn't mean that like only a major corporation can have a food related contract with the city. So, how do we just break it down and make sure that our community institutions are investing in a community food system? I'm going to launch a poll. We would love your feedback on this session. Really appreciate everyone who was able to join us this morning. And this session will be available on YouTube afterwards as well. So if you ever want to return to it or share it with a partner, you'll be able to do that too. All right. So you should have seen the poll pop up on your screen. There's just 3 questions here for you to answer, and feel free to share any more feedback for the question number 3, optional. We'll just leave that up for a few minutes, and thank you so much, Ruby, for co-presenting with me.
Always an honor. Thank you, everyone. Hope to hear from you soon.
Mm-hmm.